Chief Executive Palmer, we're ready up here whenever you are.
Get going in 1 second here.
Sure.
Okay, if we're ready, I'm going to call the Butte-Silver Boat Council of Commissioners regular meeting for Wednesday, November 18th, 2020 to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Chief Executive, we have 11 present, 1 absent. Commissioner Anderson is not here.
Let the record show that Commissioner Anderson is not here this evening. Commissioner McDonough, would you lead us in the prayer and the pledge, please? Or just the prayer?
Mighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which shall greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver Bow. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen.
Thank you. Next, we'll go for the approval of the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 regular meeting. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'll make a motion that we approve the November 4th regular meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion made and second to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2020 regular meeting. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Let the record show that Commissioner Anderson has joined.
All right. Welcome back, Bill.
Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
Mr. Chief Executive, 12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion carries. We do not have any items not addressed on the agenda this evening, so under the Chief Executive's report, we'd just like to congratulate, first of all, Finance and Budget Department for receiving the CAFR Award again this year. It's several years in a row that they have done this, and it's a national recognition of our Finance and Budget Department, and it's an impartial panel that meets and sets high standards for the program, demonstrating a constructive spirit of full disclosure to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the CAFR. It's the highest form of recognition in the area of government accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by government and its management. I just would really like to, when you see Danette and her staff, congratulate her once again on this great award. And other things, COVID's going rampant in the community. And I would just like to once again emphasize the need to wear masks when you're in public or within a group, avoid the larger gatherings and social distance. Our numbers are just skyrocketing. But having said that, we'll go to public comment on any item on the agenda. Commissioner Morgan.
Thanks, Mr. Chief Executive. I don't have anything to read into the record, but let's see if we have a phone call, which looks like we do. Thank you for calling the Butte-Silver Bow Council of Commissioners meeting. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. This is Clark Grant. I'm at 156 West Granite here in Butte. And wanted to comment on communications number 8 and 9 on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Okay. It's communication 477 and 478. So, the announcement of Butte-Silver Bow's intent to demolish another building in the Uptown came in yesterday's paper. As a proponent and practitioner of redevelopment efforts in the Uptown, I see the proposed demolition of the building at 135 East Park as a failure on several levels. Firstly, Silver Bow Properties failed to maintain the building, and their unwillingness or inability to perform basic structural fixes now creates a problem for our local government. And our local failed to implement the comprehensive historic preservation plan it adopted years ago that established a process for situations such as this. Without the key components of that plan enacted, we'll continue to see the deterioration of the uptown and Butte's historic fabric. For example, we never saw the formation of an independent nonprofit organization that would have a formal arrangement with Butte-Silver to acquire and repair properties such as this one, which was part of that plan. Our community enrichment department has failed, not in their pursuit to follow the dangerous buildings ordinance they established, but with their unimaginative approach to neglected buildings overall, finding no recourse more productive than knocking buildings down with heavy machinery. It's far easier to destroy than to repair, but the easiest route is not always the best, and the proposed cost of demolition would, in this case, be enough to repair the roof and stabilize the structure. Demolition is not the only option here, and in the long term, it's not even the most fiscally responsible option. Our Historic Preservation Office has failed if they do not insist that this building go before the Historic Preservation Commission for demolition review. These combined failures and your action tonight on the council may well leave a mark on the uptown in the form of another blank spot, one more hole within what's left of the historic business district. In time, this blank spot will probably become a vacant lot filled with knapweed and garbage like so many others. I encourage you to consider whether or not that's a trade we're willing to make, especially as Butte is experiencing unprecedented interest and investment in real estate. After all, these buildings are unique, historically significant, and irreplaceable. We've seen just this week how disposable new construction can be with the demolition of the town pump on Montana Street. Town pumps come and go, but once these brick buildings uptown are gone, they're gone. It's time to find a new approach to neglected buildings in our community. Destroying them destroys our history, and it comes at the cost of future revitalization efforts. With help from SARTA and a good team of volunteer laborers, I myself have fixed a building with a failed roof and precarious brick walls. It can be done. I urge you to develop a more constructive settlement for this property once the county becomes the owner, and I urge you to insist, at the very least, that it go before the Historic Preservation Commission for demolition review. Until these issues can be considered further, I ask you to deny communications 477 and 478. And thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Chief Executive, that looks like it concludes all of our phone calls.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to section 1, bid openings, public hearings, and or presentations. Public hearings, number 1, communication 2020-450. Kristen Rose, a Tiffin administrator, requesting council of commissioners schedule a public hearing for November 18th, 2020 regarding the addition of a grant from the Economic Development Administration in the amount of $2,974,333 to assist Butte-Silver and Port of Montana for track construction at Montana Connections and the Port of Montana. First of all, County Attorney Joyce, do we have proof of publication for the 3?
Well, Mr. Chief Executive, there is proof of publication for all 3 public hearings and all appear to be in order.
Thank you. So do we have a staff report? Let's see who's on here. Kristen, are you on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Kristen,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. So this is a grant we received from the EDA.
You're
to
fading out a
support
little
our-
bit, Kristen.
What's that?
You're fading out. You can.
Okay. Let's see. This is new equipment for community development, so we're testing it out. How's that?
That's good.
So it's a grant we received from the EDA, the Economic Development Administration, to support our track development out in Montana Connections in the Port of Montana. This roughly $3 million grant supports about an $11 million project. $6 million of it will come from the TIFID and $2 million will come from the Port of Montana. We're looking to add that to our budget so we can get construction going in the spring.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Kristen? We'll see. Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. It's not a question, but kudos to Kristen and the rest of the board members out at the Montana Connections Business Park and the Ramsey Tiffin for all of the hard work. I know that as a board member, we've been discussing this for close to 8 years, but it's really nice to see it come to fruition, and really thankful to Kristen and the staff at Butte-Silver Bow to make this happen. It's a big shot in the arm, and it's going to happen before sunset, so kudos to the department.
I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you, Commissioner McDonough. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing and call for proponents. Do we have any proponents? No calls yet, Commissioner Morgan?
No, Mr. Chief Executive.
We'll go to second call for proponents.
No calls.
Third and final call for proponents.
No calls.
Seeing none, we'll go to opponents. Do we have any opponents?
No calls.
Second call for opponents.
No calls.
Third and final call for opponents.
No calls.
Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Go to communication number 2020-461. Dylan Pipinich, Assistant Planning Director, requesting Council of Commissioners approval to schedule a public hearing on November 18th, 2020 for the amended plat of Lot 1B of the Davis and Ruth 4 major subdivision. Dylan, are you on the line? Or Lori?
Mayor, Mr. Chief Executive.
Dylan, I didn't see you up there. Go ahead.
I have a small PowerPoint. I don't know if I can share my screen or IT will show it. I sent it to him earlier. So this is a subdivision out on Beef Trail.
Dylan, you have to share it. I guess they have.
Oh.
Set up, share it.
Okay. Pull it up.
Command center. There you go.
So this is the amended plat of Lot 1B of the Davis and Ruth minor subdivision. So being that this was a subdivision before, actually the Davis and Ruth major subdivision, sorry. So this was a subdivision before, so this is what's called a subsequent minor subdivision. There's a lot out there that's 55.5 acres that's owned by Pete and Ruth. He wants to divide it into 3 parcels, one for his son Matt, who built a house, and then the remaining 50 acres split approximately in half. Part of it's going to go to his sister. So this is a subsequent minor subdivision that is treated like a major subdivision. Here's an aerial photograph of the location. Beef Trail Road on the east end of it there, and then ski area loop south. Property is located in the R1S one family suburban residence zone. The comprehensive plan of the growth policy designation is already 10. And here's the zoning designation. And here's their proposed plat. Like I said, you're going to turn the 55.5 acre lot into lots E1, E2, and E3. E3 in the southeast corner will be for Pete and his son Matt to build a home, and then the other 2 lots will be for future residential development. You can see on the plat they've identified a intermittent stream. That's basically a snowmelt runoff ditch that's got some wetland areas in there, and the subdivision regulations require some no build setbacks in there. They've identified those on the plat. And here's some photos of the property. So this is ski area loop. That's Pete Enruth's house. This is looking north. Again, looking north. So it's mostly vacant land, some rolling sagebrush pasture ground. The planning board met last month and reviewed the subdivision and recommended approval. Some of the notable things that came out at that hearing was the applicant is requesting a variance. So our subdivision regulations actually require either a walking trail, sidewalk, curb, and gutter out here. And they're requesting not to install that. The thought process being that it's rural in nature. There's plenty of room to get out and walk and along the roads and in the properties, and there is no sidewalk, curb and gutter trail system out there to connect to. Some of the staff findings, staff did agree with that variance request from the sidewalk, curb, and gutter. And another notable thing that came up, and you can see in these pictures here, is currently the access to this property at Pete Enruth's is a road easement that goes through the neighboring landowner to the east. And it didn't go all the way through to lot E1 on the west end of the subdivision. So the applicants have secured an easement for ski area loop from that subdivision. So the main access and ingress and egress for these lots will be from ski area loop, which is a pretty good thing because that right now there's two parallel roads out there. The access to Pete Enruth's house and then ski area loop. With gaining that easement from that private road for ski area loop provides, it's a larger road, it meets our standards, and it provides access to lots E1, E2, and E3. So with that, the planning board met and went through the criteria for the subdivision last month, as I stated, and they did recommend approval with several conditions of addressing the preliminary plat is good for 3 years. The final plat shall conform with the requirements of the Butte-Silver subdivision regulations, and that includes that the treasurer that the taxes are paid. Each resident shall be required to install a residential fire sprinkler system at the time of construction. That is one thing that they also agreed to do. So the subdivision regulations, because it's outside of the fire district, they have to meet certain regulations for fire protection. They have several options. The applicant chose to install fire sprinkler systems as that their preferred option. They need to get a weed bond and weed control plan, and that any future development also looks at the sidewalk. The variance was accepted by the planning board for this development only. So any future subdivisions, they would return and look at that sidewalk or walking trail requirement. And then the final condition being that the applicants are required to secure all applicable permits may be necessary to make improvements in the designated wetlands or surface water bodies, including stormwater discharge from DEQ, floodplain development permit, a 310 permit, and a 404 permit as necessary. Not saying that they're necessary, but just any state required permits as necessary. So with that, I can wrap up. Welcome any questions. I believe, stop sharing my screen. I believe the applicant is on here too, if you'd like any questions from Matt, Pete, and Ruth.
Okay, Pete, did you have any comments, or do you want to just answer questions if they come up? Are there any questions from the commissioners for Dylan or the applicants? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing and call for proponents. Do we have any proponents?
No calls, Mr. Chief Executive.
Second call for proponents.
No calls.
Third and final call for proponents.
No calls.
Seeing none, we'll go to opponents. Do we have any opponents?
No calls.
Second call for opponents.
No calls.
Third and final call for opponents.
No calls.
Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Go to communication 2020-465. Karen Burns, Community Development Director, requested Council and Commissioners' approval to schedule a public hearing on November 18th, 2020 to amend the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget related to an increase in authority in the parking garage budget for security upgrades. Karen. You have a
Hey,
staff
everybody.
report.
I'm with Kristen, so hopefully you can see me and hear me.
We can.
Great. So this is a process to amend the budget in the parking garage. This is a transfer of funds that will come from the URA. The URA board has voted to make some improvements to the security of the garage with a rolling gate, security gate, and some security updates to the elevator. The URA will be funding these out of their budget, but we need to spend them out of the parking garage budget. So this is a procedural shifting of budget authority. So we are increasing budget authority in the parking garage budget of $40,000, which will be transferred from the URA.
Any questions from the council for Karen? Commissioner Sorge?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Karen, are you also going to be looking at cameras for the garage also?
Karen?
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Sorge, members of council. We do have cameras in the garage now, but we will be adding some additional cameras, one to the elevator and a couple more on the 3rd and 4th floors.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you, Karen. That'll be a good addition.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing and call for proponents.
No calls.
Second call for proponents.
No calls.
Third and final call for proponents.
No calls.
Seeing none, we'll go to opponents. Do we have any opponents?
No calls.
Second call for opponents.
No calls.
Third and final call for opponents.
No calls.
Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and go to the consent agenda, section 2. A, committee reports 1 through 4, and B, communications 1 through 12. Do we have any segregations or friendly amendments? Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I would like to segregate item number 8, 2020-477.
Any further segregations? Seeing none, Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I make a motion that we approve section 2, the consent agenda. A, the committee reports 1 through 4. B, communications 1 through 12 with the exclusion of number 8, 2020-477.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda, A, 1 through 4, and B, 1 through 12, exclusive of number 8. Is there anything on the question? Everyone please vote. Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote? 12-0. Motion carries.
Yep.
Next, we'll go to communication number 8, communication 2020-477. Ed Randall, Community Enrichment Director, requesting Council of Commissioners concurrence and authorization for the Chief Executive to sign a settlement agreement between the City and County of Butte-Silver, Montana, for Silver Bow properties related to 135 East Park Street in Butte, Montana. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. This particular parcel is in my district. I've been looking at it for 14 years now, and it has been in every state of disrepair. I know when Mr. Edwards and his partner Max, they bought the building, it already was in pretty dire straits, and I guess economically it was not feasible at the time up until now to really do anything with it. So I'm not really talking about opposing anything, but just since this is probably one of the few things that we've come across as a new council with some new people, I was going to ask Karen if she wouldn't just give us a little update on this. I know her whole department has worked really hard trying to mitigate the situation, and I had a couple of questions for her about the agreement. So Karen, if you don't mind kind of recapping what we talked about today, are you still on?
Yes.
Okay.
Cindy, I'm here.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it.
Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive and Council of Commissioners. So this has been a really difficult project and thing that we've been working on for quite some time. And I know you have a little bit of history on how long we've been working on this, but we have worked very hard in our office with Silver Bow Properties prior to this becoming posted dangerous building. We have worked with them in terms of helping provide financing for their projects throughout the community. We restructured some financing with them a few years ago, allowing them to free up some of their cash flow to possibly invest in additional structures. We have a large loan with them. We also, I know they have a large obligation to the BLDC as well. And unfortunately, they were unable to perform any work of significance on this property. And we've worked very hard to market it. We have worked with folks that have been interested in the property for redevelopment purposes. Unfortunately, it's just too far gone structurally to make it worthwhile for anyone to invest additional funds. The amount of funds it would take are significant. Much more, I mean, it's hard to put a value on these buildings, don't get me wrong. They're historic, they're beautiful. This building has had a hole in its roof for a number of years. The floor structures have crashed all the way through the building. I am very nervous that this building, it is dangerous, and we've posted it as such, and we're working really to mitigate that. I believe the questions that Cindy had for me today had to do with our debt obligations and what's tied to the building. We, as the URA, will be releasing our position on this building. It doesn't release Silver Bow Properties from their debt obligation to us. It transfers that, that obligation will be on other collateral that's provided for the loan. We have a position on 17 properties that are owned by Silver Bow Properties. So it does not significantly impact our position on our debt with them. So it's an easy decision for us to make to release this lien, to allow the transfer of property and for this to happen for the safety of our community. I can also tell you that we have been working with multiple folks that have shown interest, high interest, in redeveloping the lot, the vacant lot, the land that will be as a result of this demolition. So I have no doubt that we will see something good happen on this piece of property. I hope I addressed the questions we talked about earlier today, Cindy.
Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Thank you, Karen. That's exactly what I would like. A lot of folks don't realize some of the backstory here. And then I know Ed's on the line, Ed Randall, and this has been noticed as a dangerous building for over a year now. And that's another year that roof has been failing, along with other features of the building. And I was just going to say that I understand a previous call-in was worried about historic preservation. I understand that, but there is an exclusionary clause in the historic preservation ordinance that allows us to take over in different departments, such as community enrichment and in Karen's department, and also our building codes person, to notice this is a dangerous building, and that kind of trumps the historic preservation aspect of our ordinance. So Ed, if I misspoke, please let me know. But I just think that needs to be clarified on the record that, this falls under an exclusionary portion of the ordinance.
Mr. Randall.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Shaw, and council members. You're correct, Commissioner Shaw. We have asked the council to use the public safety exclusion because of the condition of the building. We've been working on this for a year. I made the decision early on to, with Karen, Eileen Joyce, but I'm the one that wanted to go forward and try to negotiate with anyone that was interested in the building. And so we did meet with several groups, and the ownership now, and it just didn't work out. The numbers didn't work with anyone. And so we were left with this building, and we could either let it go to taxes, we could go to court, or we could do what we're doing. And we decided that for the public safety, this was the best option that we had. So, what we're asking is for you to approve the contract that we have, the agreement, and vote to allow us to use the public safety exclusion for 135 East Park.
Thanks, Ed.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. My question might be for Mr. Randall or Ms. Burns, but in regards to Silver Bow properties, are all of the other locations that they have, are they kind of on the up and up, or is there some that are lacking roofs and such still, or where do we sit on our other stuff?
Mr. Randall.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. Chairman Morgan. We are actively dealing with a couple other properties, mainly on the vacant building registry and some minor issues. But this is the building that is obviously in poor condition, and this is the one that we're speaking about now. But we are involved in a couple others. Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Question, just for the record, after the building is gone, and who owns the lot after that? And then what happens to the lot? I missed that.
Butte-Silver will own the property, the lot.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chief. Mr. Randall, what's a estimated cost to do the project?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chief Executive, I couldn't hear the question.
Could you repeat that, Commissioner Sorge?
Certainly. Mr. Randall, what's the estimated cost to do the whole project?
Thank you. Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Sorge, we believe it'll be between $50,000 and $60,000. But I want everyone to, I want to be very transparent and say that we haven't been able to get into the building. But we think that those costs will come down. We have a great public works crew. They're going to be doing the work. We've been working with Mr. Neary, Director Neary from Public Works. So we're confident that we can get it done in that financial parameters right there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I'm not sure if this is for Karen or Mr. Randall, but what kind of safeguards do we have that this isn't going to continue happening to buildings such as Silver Bow properties or other local owners? They just continue to fail to neglect their buildings. They don't put money into them. No matter what we ask them to do, they just ignore us. What can we do to keep this from continue happening. Once again, the taxpayers are getting stuck with a huge bill from somebody that refused to take care of their properties. And it's up to us as the council to figure out a way to stop this from happening before it gets to this point. And it doesn't matter the answers, whoever has an answer. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take the first shot at it. And, with the passage of the mothballing ordinance, this is exactly what the intent of that ordinance is to prevent these buildings from getting into the condition that this one got into. So when we notice a building as being a property that it's vacant and it should be mothballed, we do an inspection, or Butte-Silver Boat team goes in and does an inspection with the property owner or their property manager. And if the roof is lacking or needs attention, it is noted, and they have to come up with a work plan to make sure that that's accomplished at that time. So we feel that that's going to start saving a lot of these uptown buildings, or the older buildings, whether they're uptown or downtown. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and Karen or Ed can follow up on that if they would like.
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Callahan, Chief Executive Palmer's correct. When we passed the new dangerous building ordinance and the vacant building ordinance, there was a lot of discussion, and it was pretty painful getting those ordinances passed through this body. But it's exactly for what we're doing now, trying to prevent. We're many years behind. We've been talking about this for 10, 15, 20 years, and we finally got the ordinance, the tools that we need in place to do this, but we have systematically allowed these buildings to fall into disrepair with very little discussion or anything happening with them. It's been a fight. I'm always going to be honest with you guys. It's been a fight between historic preservation and everything else. And this is the position we're in. This isn't the only building that's going to be like this. It's not the only building that's out there. We've been talking about it for years. We finally got the tools, but we are many years behind. There's a lot of properties that are vacant and they're in horrific disrepair. So I think that we just continue to do what we're doing. We've used the dangerous building ordinance a lot, and all the buildings aren't in the position the condition that this one is in now. But as we're moving forward with the enforcement that we're doing, hopefully we won't have these issues. So we're working hard at it. We're working with the county attorney and community development, public works, and we're just going to continue to move forward.
Yeah, and I'd like to just jump in real quick.
Go ahead, Karen.
Mr. Chief Executive and members of council. So as Ed stated, we do have a new ability of enforcement through the mothballing provisions that were added to the vacant building ordinance. And we do have a great team that we are working very closely together, hand in hand with community enrichment, our Office of Community Development and Historic Preservation in enforcing these conditions of the mothballing piece of that ordinance. And we're seeing some success. We're seeing people be responsive. The approach that we're taking is very much trying to work with property owners, being very open at the beginning about what we're trying to enforce, that these are rules that you must follow, but we're also working with them to develop the plan so they don't feel completely lost about, well, where do they start? What do they have to do? We give them guidance in terms of what they need to fix and how they can get there. And then also with our funds in community development through the URA or other sources, we can offer to assist them in getting them there. So I think that this kind of approach will help us not get as many properties into the state that this one is in the future. And I can say that our team that I just mentioned is very strong, and we are dedicated to working together, and we're going to see what we can get done. And I think we're making great strides, and I think Mr. Randall and the Chief Executive would agree with me.
I would.
Commissioner Callahan.
thank Chief Executive Paul. I appreciate you guys' hard work for what you've done to get us this far, but I do remember back when we were working on this ordinance, one of the questions I asked before we passed it was, could you make sure you dot your i's and cross your t's to make sure we can do this and we can do it right? Well, now here we are, going to tear a building down, and the property owner isn't responsible for 100% of the cost. Why is it taxpayers are being asked to pay for part of this thing when we just passed an ordinance that we were trying to make the responsibility of the property?
Yeah. Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Callahan, this building is a very large building. There were a lot of, I think Karen stated this, there was a lot of backroom talk back and forth on the best way to protect the public and to use as little funds as Butte-Silver Bow would need to. And I think that we've accomplished that. Everything's not always going to be perfect. I believe the government's here to take care of the things that others just can't. We could have went a different option, I guess, and gone to court and taken longer, and we would be in the same position in 6 months or a year from now. And so I made the decision to work the property the way we did. I think it's a success. I think that we're going to look at some grant funds. We're going to have $25,000 from the property owner. $10,000 has already been paid. The rest will be in monthly installments, 6 months, 5 months, whatever it is. And I think that it's a win-win for Butte-Silver Bow. So I think the ordinance works like it should. So I would stand on that. We did cross all the T's and dot the I's, just, every property is different. And when you're dealing with something this large and in this poor condition, tough decisions have to be made, and that's what we did. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. Also, this discussion, the positive I see too is another, I know it's going to be a historic building gone, but being able to build on that property is also a positive thing. In the banking world, to finance a project as that thing sits right now is just a horrifying nightmare. But to do a new construction is kind of a little bit more fun, if you will. The thing I don't want to bulldoze any historic buildings down if we cannot, but I also don't, I don't want to be a ghost town. They tore down Yankee Stadium and built a new one that worked out okay. That'd be my best example. So, thank you.
Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I would implore the powers that be at Butte-Silver Bow to hold on to the lot once this is gone until we have design standards in place. I think that we've talked about it for a long time, but if you look at infill projects in the uptown over the years, they're horrendous. People have put structures up, but they don't blend in at all. You can talk to the locals. You can talk to visitors in our community. They could all point to the ones that have been infilled. The ones that weren't redeveloped have turned into parking lots. I would think that it would be wise for Butte-Silver Bow to push forward once the building's gone to make sure that design standards exist in our uptown historic district so that we can infill properly. I've talked to developers around the state in other communities, and they just can't believe that Butte-Silver Bow doesn't already have design standards. They said it makes it easier for the developer to build. It makes it more aesthetically pleasing to the historic districts, and it's easier to put a project together. So I understand that the building's going to come down. I used to fight for historic preservation. This one's in pretty rough shape, but I think that it's now our wake-up call to put in design standards if we're going to move forward now with this one or any other one in the future.
you. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, and I'm glad we had this discussion because every time one of these buildings is on the chopping block, it usually, this is hindsight because this was really demolished by neglect, and it's one of my pet peeves. This has been on the dangerous building notice for a year. It's getting precariously between two other buildings that are right next to the Butte Rescue Mission's thrift store, and the one on the corner, the old Atlas building. And it is a danger. And we, unfortunately, the idea of design and historical value is just gone. And it really makes me sick because it's a beautiful building. You look at the front, they've got the old cast iron columns like the Stevens block. And I wish there was some way that we could salvage materials, but I don't know how that can really be done in a safe way that does have some liability. But anyway, thank you for the discussion. I just would, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to concur with communication 2020-477 and place this on file.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to concur in the request in communication 2020-477 and place communication on file. Anything on the question? Commissioner Olson, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask?
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I guess the thing that kind of swayed me to say okay to this is that at least it appears from the memos that accompany it that it was, I think the engineers decided that it was structurally unsound and you couldn't really put it back in a habitable shape. And then also Mary McCormick, the historic preservation officer, agreed with it. It was probably time to take this one down. I also would like to note that if there was a way that we could preserve some of the structure there, like those cast iron columns, that would be great. And maybe you could incorporate those into the new building that went in its place. But I guess I'll go forward with this. Thanks all. That's all I needed to say.
Anything further on the question?
Commissioner Fisher does, Mr. Chief Executive.
Oh, Commissioner Fisher. Sorry. You're still on mute, Jim.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I support your idea. Some of these buildings got to go, others can be saved. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
There's nothing further on the question. Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
Looks like we have 11 yay and 1 nay.
Okay. Commissioner Anderson votes nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll go to section 3, ordinances and resolutions, final passage. Number 1, Council Bill number 2020-06, ordinance 2020-06. An ordinance amending chapter 32 of title 13 of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code entitled Stormwater Management, specifically amending sections 13.32.010, 13.32.020, 13.32.3030, 13.32.210, 13.32.220, 13.32.310, 13.32.330, 13.32.340, 13.32.360, 13.32.420, 13.32.430, and providing for an effective date herein. Commissioner Morgan.
Mr. Chief Executive, I move to place Council Bill 2020-06, Ordinance 2020-06 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and second to pass Council Bill number 2020-06, Ordinance 2020-06 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Seeing none, will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion carries. Number 2, Council Bill number 2020-07, ordinance 2020-07. An ordinance amending chapter 12.18 of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code entitled Street Maintenance, specifically amending section 12.18.030 and 12.18.050 entitled Method of Assessment, changing the method of assessment for the city and county of Butte-Silver single street maintenance district and providing for an effective date herein. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I move to place Council Bill 2020-07, ordinance number 2020-07 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to pass Council Bill number 2020-07, ordinance 2020-07 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. As commissioners and the chief executive, I'm sure we're all aware of the fact that this is just changing the method. Since the article in the Standard yesterday, there's been discussion around the community that this is a newly imposed tax, even though I thought the article addressed the situation very well. But just for the record, I think that, moving forward, this is not a new tax. This is allowing the council to decide if we're going to stay with the per parcel method or the per unit method moving forward, which will be decided annually, and the public has the opportunity to speak at a public hearing every year in regards to this ordinance change. So, I've had a couple of inquiries and there's been some discussion amongst folks that this is a newly imposed tax. It's not, and I just want to state that on the record. If anybody's tuning in, it's not a newly imposed tax. It's an ability for us as commissioners or the chief executive's office to decide in the budget and finance and the public works which method suits our needs best moving forward annually. But again, it has to be reviewed. Everybody has the opportunity in the public to comment at a public hearing annually. This is every year. And then the council is going to make the decision. But I just wanted that stated for the record. I thought the article yesterday was great, but there's been discussion since, so just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the question? Seeing none, will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
Like we have 11 yea and 1 nay.
Anderson, nay, so motion carries. Section 3, Resolution 2020-65, a resolution amending the budget during the fiscal year after conducting a public hearing and a regularly scheduled meeting of the Council of Commissioners in accordance with Section 7.6-4006 MCA, appropriating unanticipated revenue from drug forfeiture proceeds in order to purchase law enforcement related equipment and providing for an effective date herein. Commissioner Morgan.
Mr. Chief Executive, I move to place Council Resolution 2020-65 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to pass Council Resolution 2020-65 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Seeing none, will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
Mr. Chief Executive, I need to ask Commissioner Shaw, how did you vote?
Yeah, it didn't register when I put it in. It's a yay.
12 yea, 0 nay.
Motion carries. Number 4, Resolution 2020-70, a resolution approving growth policy amendment number 34 to the 1987 Butte-Silver Master Plan and approving changes to the land use map of the 1987 Butte-Silver Master Plan incorporating by reference the text of the amendments and the changes to the maps, and providing for an effective date herein. Commissioner Morgan.
Mr. Chief Executive, I move to place Resolution 2020-70 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to pass Council Resolution 2020-70 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Seeing none, will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
Twelve yeas, 0 nay.
Motion carries. Now is the time for public comment on any public matter not on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I do have one letter to read, and currently there's nobody on the phone.
Okay.
The first one is from R. Edward Banderob, 2601 Grand Avenue. I must ask, during the spike in our community of COVID-19 pandemic, where are our elected representatives of the people? Where are our community leaders? I have just needlessly lost a beloved sister-in-law to the coronavirus. When 8 countries in the far eastern Asia with a combined population of 1.796 billion have been able to contain this virus, have only had to date a total of 7,581 deaths, and have only an average of 0.55 deaths per 100K population to date. I have nothing but contempt for an elected body of officials who sit and do nothing collectively to try and draw our community together to fight this virus attack. Elected officials who say it is not their responsibility when the first duty of any government is to work together to keep the citizens in its jurisdiction safe. Even Governor Bullock says we are all sick of this virus. We all have to collectively recognize this virus will not stop spreading through our community anytime soon unless we all take active steps to stop its spread. The responsibility for doing that rests with each and every one of us. Isn't it about time this council becomes actively involved in at least collectively discussing the status, roles, responsibilities, and liabilities of the Butte-Silver City County government relative to controlling this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic in our community? Again, that was from R. Edward Banderob, 2601 Grand Avenue. That's all I have, Mr. Chief Executive, and there are no phone calls.
Okay. This time we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Morgan.
Mr. Chief Executive, before I do that, I just want to remind everybody that due to Thanksgiving next week, we will be having our committee of the whole meeting on Tuesday evening instead of Wednesday. And so please adjust your calendars accordingly. And at this time, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. Anything on the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Good night. Wear your mask.